Hi, in this video we're going to be looking at how you can pass data from your Power BI report to an OpenAI model, process the data and get a response back and then display that response in your Power BI report. Hi, this is Jason from Effective Dashboards, helping maintenance and reliability professionals get the most out of Power BI. So welcome back to another video. So in this video we're going to be looking at running a flow here that's going to pass some data that you select and also a question to an OpenAI model, and then we're going to get the response back, and that response is going to be also integrated into our Power BI report, so it's going to augment it with some additional data. Now the use case I've got here is that we've got a work order. In fact, we've got a lot of work orders here, and we want to be able to carry out some analysis on the quality of the data that's entered into these work orders. Okay, so it's a QC analysis. And what we're going to do is we're going to pass it this data here, which is a description of the defect, and we're going to set up a prompt that's going to instruct the large language model to look at that data, compare that against something that's good practice, and come back with some feedback. Now, first of all, it's going to create a general assessment, then it's going to give us some feedback on its assessment of the data here. Then it's going to provide some coaching tips so that we could use that data to provide some coaching to the person that's entering that information. And then it's going to give it an overall rating from 1 to 3. Okay, so let's quickly start by going through the setup. We've got a list of work orders here, and each one of the work orders has got a number, it's got a description, it's got various other bits and pieces. But the key thing we're going to look at in the data that we're going to analyze is this defect report in here. So that's a long text, free text information about the defect that's actually been reported. And that is the field that we're going to analyze using the capabilities of the large language model. Okay, so in this example, we're going to use OpenAI. We're going to send that text to OpenAI with a prompt that's going to ask it to analyze that, and then it's going to provide us with a response. And that response is going to be its opinion on how good that text is. What's the quality of that text? Now, typically, you would actually, if you think about it, you'd want this done at the point, that analysis to be done at the point when somebody had actually just entered the data, so that you could provide the feedback instantly. They could go back and make some changes, make some modifications, and then that feedback loop would be done there and done and dusted. It would be quite quick. However, that might not be possible. It might well be that it's too costly, it's not technically possible, it might take too long, and you want to start getting some feedback and some analysis done of this type of data quicker. So this is an example where you can use use Power BI to actually create that information. Okay, so we've got that. Now, once the large language model passes back that information, we need a place to store that. Now, you could write it back to the database, and I would probably that's the ideal situation, is you create a field within the table and you write it back to that field. But for now, and for the ease of this demo, we're going to create a SharePoint list, and that's going to be the place we're going to store the response from the large language model. So let's go, and I'll just quickly show you that. Okay, so it's a really straightforward SharePoint list here. It's got an ID, which is an auto-populated ID. It's got a work order number, and it's got the defect assessment. And that's going to be the place we're going to store the information. So when the information comes back, when the response comes back, it's going to be put into that field here. Now, one thing you do need to be aware of is that this field here needs to be a format that is multiple lines of text, okay, because it's going to be quite a big response. Okay, so once you've done that, I've just put in some dummy data here for just now. We can delete that later. Then we need to go and copy this part of the URL, and we're going to import this into our Power BI. So you copy this URL here, and we're going to import this into the Power BI report. Okay, so I'm back in my Power BI report. Going to go to Get Data, More. Then I'm going to choose this SharePoint online list, and then we're going to paste the URL in here. Now at this point in time, you might get a pop-up asking you to validate your credentials and log in with your Microsoft account, so you'd need to do that. I've already done that. So I'm going to go and find this list here. So here it is here, work order AI assessment results. Okay, and there's the data here. There's a wee refresh button here if you need to refresh this, just to see what the latest preview is. And we can see that it's got a lot of data here, but we're going to go into this transform data. And then we're going to there's lots of fields in here that gets added to the list automatically. So we don't need most of these. So we're going to go to choose columns. And then the only fields that we actually need are going to be the work order number, which is here, and the defect report response assessment. Okay, so it's been truncated there, but that's fine. Okay, so that's the only fields we're actually going to pull in here. In fact, actually, I'm going to go back and I'm going to choose another field. I'm going to choose the created date as well, because it is useful to have a timestamp in here. So I'm going to choose this created. Okay, so we can see there's some information. There's nothing in here for just now, but that is us. So we're just going to go and load that in. Okay, so we can see these data types here are all unassigned. So we're going to select all of this, and I'm going to go to transform, and I'm going to go to detect data type, and just make sure that it's all given the right data here. So we've got this one here is still undetected, and this one here is going to be a date. Okay, because that's null, so we've got to go and actually tell. So for this one here, we're going to go to text. Okay, so then we can load this in. Okay, so that's loaded in. The next thing we need to do is establish a connection. So here it is here, it's all on its own. Now we need to make sure that this work order number here is connected to this work order number in here, this work order ID. So let's just establish that relationship there. Okay, it's a one-to-one now. Ultimately, there might be multiples in here, so let's just change that. And we'll do this as a one-to-many. And I'm also going to change this cross-filter to be single. Okay. Okay, so that's our data model in place. This means that we can now have a connection or a join between this table here, the work order AI assessment results, through the work order ID to the work order ID in the work orders table. So when I pull in any field here, there's going to be a relationship established here, and we can display that. So let's pull in the defect report assessment. Now there's not going to be anything in here just now, because there's not any work orders in here for it to link to this defect assessment. But once that starts to come through into the data model, we're going to see that next to each of the work orders. Right, so the next stage is to add in our Power Automate. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in this Power Automate, which is still in preview mode. It's been there for ages. But this is a button. This inserts a button that triggers a Power Automate flow. Now, the first thing we do before we go in and start to create the flow is we establish which data, which columns essentially that will decide the data set that we're going to pass across to the Power Automate flow. So the data that we want to pass across is going to be from the work order table, and it's going to be the work order number, okay? And it's going to be the defect report. Okay, so this column here, so that's the text we want to analyze, and that's the text we want to have available to us to pass across to the OpenAI model. So work order number and the defect report. Okay, so that's there now. And then we go into this mode options here, and then edit. And that then opens up the Power Automate Flow Builder within Power BI. So once you're here, you can connect that button to an existing flow, but we're going to go in and create a new one. So we're just going to go into new and create an instant cloud flow. And this is where we start to build the steps. Okay, so the first step is going to be basically to call the API for the large language model from OpenAI. Now, before we can do that, the first thing we need to do is go and actually get an API key and also get some of the settings. But I'll go in and just put the first action here, which is the HTTP. And this is the action we're going to use here. It's an HTTP call. Now, it is a premium connector, so you will need a premium account to be set up. So it's an account you need to pay. I think it's about 15. I think in the UK it's like £15 a month to get this access to these premium connectors. So you will need that to use this approach. Okay, so in here we can see we've got the different parameters. So we need to figure out what parameters it is we're going to send across to the OpenAI API. So let's go in to the OpenAI website and we'll get that details. Okay, so if you go to openai.com, and you'll need to create an account. So I've got one, so I'm just going to log in. And then we've got some options here. We're going to go to API, and we're going to go to, first of all, personal. Okay, now in here you can view API keys. So this is an area where you can go in and create a new key. Okay, so you just click on that button, you give it a name, it'll generate a key for you. You need to copy that key. You won't get access to that key again. Okay, so you need to copy it and paste it somewhere in a notepad somewhere for just now. But generate that key, and that's going to be what we're going to use as part of the API when we pass it across to the model. The next thing we're going to do is go to this API reference. Okay, so once we're here, we're going to click on this making requests area here. And the first bit of information we need is this URL here. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to go back in here, and I'm going to first of all select this as being a post, and then I'm going to paste that in there. Okay, so now we've got headers, header keys to put in. So these key and value pairs, we need to actually go and get some information to put into here. So let's go back here, and here are the two different header pairs we need here: content type and authorization bearer. So let's go and copy this content type first of all. We'll put that in there, and we'll use that in here. And then we'll copy authorization. And then in this second bit, we need the word bearer, and then a space, and then in here, you need to put your key. Okay, so the key was the key that you created just a few minutes ago in the video there. Okay, so we'll just save that. And that's that first bit done. And then the next bit we need to do is put in a body. Okay, so this is the body that we need, and we just need the basically JSON format here that's in between these curly brackets. So let's copy that, and we're going to paste it into there. I'll just make a little formatting change here just to make it a bit easier to read. So we've got a few parameters that are passing across. So this is going to be the request that we pass across to this URL here, the OpenAI model. So here's the model we're going to be using here is GPT 3.5 Turbo. And you can change the model to be whatever model it is you want, but we'll leave it at that one for just now. Then we've got a message, and the message consists of two parts here. We've got the role, and we've got the content. Okay, so what we want for this is we've got a role as basically a role set up as a user, and this is the content. So as a user, we're passing across a prompt here that's going to say this is a test. Okay, that's all we're going to do. And this is the equivalent of typing, if you ever use ChatGPT or Bard or anything, this is the equivalent of you typing into the chat. Okay, this message here. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is add in a new step here. And then we need to have basically, this is going to generate a response, but we need a place to store that response. So that's what we're going to do next. So we're going to go in here to an option which is going to be called parse JSON, okay, because it's going to provide a file format that's going to be a JSON file as a response, as an output from the model. So this parse JSON is going to be where we capture the response, okay. So the content here, we're going to use this dynamic content, is going to be the body, okay, so the body of the HTTP, so it's going to be the response here, or well, that's going to be the whole file here. And then we need to provide it with a schema. Now you can go in and generate from a sample. So we're going to press that button here. And then we're going to go back to the OpenAI site. And if we look here, it says that this basically, you should get a response back that resembles the following. Okay, so this is the file that we're going to use as an input into this section here. And then we're just going to say done. But yeah, that's it. Okay, yep. So this is going to be then the JSON format, the template, or the schema that's going to basically be able to store that data. So that's done the first part of this. So let's save that, and then we'll save and apply, and then we're going to go back in here. Okay, so let's just edit this, and we'll change the name, and we'll save that, and then we're just going to apply that. Successfully applied, that's good. And then go back to the report, and we can see we've got a button here to run the flow. So let's just run this flow. I just want to make sure that everything's working and we're able to post the request and get the response back. So we can go in here to edit. Okay, so we can see it was a success. So let's go and click on here, and then it kind of breaks it down. So let's see what happens here. So everything looks okay. This is a test. We just use that exact stuff. What I'm really interested in here is that we got something back. This is a test. Okay, so we got that back. So before we do that, actually that was the standard stuff. So let's just go and change this. So to change it, we're going to go back in here. We're going to go to edit. We're going to go in here, and I'm just going to go and ask it a different question. Okay, what are the 5 stages of the work management process? So let's save and apply that. Okay, go back to the report. Let's run it now. We'll go back in and have a look at the results. Okay, so that's exceeded again, and then we'll just go straight in here, and then if we go to the outputs, here we go, output of the body, and here we can see the 5 stages of the work management process are planning, etc, etc. So we can clearly see that we're getting a response here. Great. So that's us now set up the model, which is good. So now we're going to ask it a better question. So in here, instead of just asking this question here, we're actually going to put in a prompt here that's going to ask it to go and review, assume the identity of a work management expert, first of all, and then go and review the data against best practice. Okay, so your task is to create a review of the quality of the work order defect reporting text, and 1, provide your expert analysis feedback on the quality of the information against generally accepted work management best practices. And then step 2 is suggest up to 3 actions to take to improve the text. And then step number 3 is, after reviewing the text, provide a rating of the quality user scale 1 to 3. And then the scale from the 1 to 3 is 3 equals good, and then basically I've asked it to, I've basically laid out what 1, 2 and 3 means. Okay, so I'm also going to give it some additional information here related to the output format. It's important that the response is structured in this format. 1, general assessment are the contents of section 1, feedback here. 2, coaching tips. So it's going to be the coaching tips that we're going to get from here. So so this is section 2, suggest up to 3 actions to take to improve the text. And then section 3 is going to be called rating. Just add a number from 1 to 3 here, nothing else. This number should be the last character in the response. Now I'm telling it to respond with the last character because I want it to be easy for us to just to draw that out from within Power BI, so we can isolate that number, and then we can use that as a metric in some of our reports. Okay, so that's there. I think I might need to finish it off with a comma. Right. So let's save that. Now the next thing we need to do is pass it the text. So if we go back up to here, your task is to create a review of the quality of the work order, reporting text, provide the feedback on the quality of information, generally accepted work management best practice. Right, so I'm going to put it in here. So what we can do is we can click in here, and if we scroll down into here, we can actually look for the input from the button, which is going to be this here, this defect report. Okay, now as soon as I've added this, you'll notice something. It's automatically encapsulated this HTTP response within an applies to each. Okay, that's because there could be multiple rows in here. Okay, and we want to do it for each one of the rows. So by adding it into here, it's recognized that this is a data set that's got multiple rows in it potentially. So that's why it's added this applies to each in here. So that's fine, it's exactly what we want. So let's save that. Okay, now what we actually want to do is we want that to also be in here. So I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to copy this to clipboard because we want the action to be part of that applies to. Okay, because if you remember what we're going to be doing, we are going to be, if we go in here, go to my clipboard, and then just paste it in there. Okay, and then we can delete from here. Okay, so for each item in the list of work orders that we're going to pass, we want basically it to go in, look at the defect text, which is going to be this here that we've passed it, and then get that response back here. Okay, and this is going to be the response that we're going to use. And then the next thing we're going to do with that response is we're going to write that as a record to the SharePoint list. Okay, so in SharePoint, I'm going to go and type in SharePoint here. And it's going to be called create item. And then we're going to go and hopefully get our SharePoint on here, which is this one. And then the list name, work order AI assessment results. And then we can see we've got the fields that we added in here. Now the title, we are going to have to put something in here. So let's just put in, let's just type in title here. And then in here, what we're going to do is work order number. Remember, was passed as part of the original data set. So it should be down here. Here we go, work order number. And then this defect report assessment OpenAI is going to be what is being returned in the content. Okay, and again, it's put applies to each around here, but that's fine. It's just because the content can be multiple rows, but in our instance, it's not. But we'll just leave it as it is. And we can see now we're going to write back to our SharePoint list with the title is just going to be the text title. The work order number is going to be the work order number that we actually originally had from the passed from Power BI. So we're going to write that back into the SharePoint. And that's going to allow us to establish that connection. And then the content is going to be what was generated by the large language model, by OpenAI, and passed to this JSON file. And we've just basically picked the content out of that JSON file. Okay, so let's just save that. And we'll apply it. And then we'll go back to the report. Now, this is probably going to be a two-part video because it's already quite long. Just now, I'm just going to basically show you it working in the setup. Okay. In the next video, we're going to go into some safeguards, because if you've got 1,000 work orders here and you press this run flow, it's going to pass 1,000 work orders and it's going to process it 1,000 times. We don't want that. But just for the purposes of this video, just so you can see the connection and get it established and understand how the information can flow back and forth between OpenAI, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of these, because I only want to pass one work order across. Okay, if I select two work orders will be passed across as part of this data that's passed to this flow here. So then I'm going to run it, and then we're going to go in and edit to see if this flow ran. Okay, and it says it's exceeded, which is good. Okay, so let's see what happened here. So we've got the response. That was the input prompt we did. And then if we go down here, that was what was passed. Let's go into this one here. And the output. Okay, so general assessment. So we can see it's definitely created something. And then let's see, hopefully it did add something in here. So we'll see in a second. It looks like it passed something across and was successful. So let's go back to our report and we're going to go and refresh it. Okay, so here we have it. We've got, just make this button a little bit smaller. We've got an assessment here. Okay, so this is the text. Now this text could have been larger, it could have been, this was just text that I automatically generated. I actually got ChatGPT to generate this text. But here's the assessment here. So what is it saying? It's basically saying, well actually, let's make it slightly smaller first, make it a bit more readable. The information provided in the work order defect report text is concise and covers essential details required to address the issue. The defect location, observations and actions are clearly stated. So we can see that it's giving us some feedback here. And then it's saying the coaching tips include additional details about the AC unit, including the model and the previous maintenance history, and provide the context of troubleshooting potential solutions. Specify the troubleshooting steps that are taken before to determine that the compressor needs to be replaced. This can avoid unnecessary replacement. So these coaching tips could then be fed back to Mark Smith to say, okay, here's some information that you can use to improve the defect report the next time. And then we've got an overall rating here. Okay, so I can go ahead now and run it for the other ones. So I'm just going to filter that number 1. And then I'm going to run the flow. Okay, so that's going to cycle through each one of them, and it's going to go and carry out an assessment of this defect report. Okay, so this is triggering the flow now. Let's see how it's getting on. Now this one will take a lot longer because it's going to have to go through 19 work orders rather than just one. Okay, so we can see that's running. If we click on here, we should be able to see it in action. Okay, so here's the 20 there. So this will start to appear once the calls have been made and the responses have been generated. So we'll leave that for a second. Okay, so that ran successfully, and we can see here that we have got all of the different assessments here against the work orders. Now there's a couple that have come through as duplicates. It's because I've probably pressed the button twice. So we're going to go and but basically the information is all here. It's all good stuff. This is going to take this potentially save hours of basically reviewing the quality of the work orders that are entered into the system, which would have been a manual process, but also putting together the coaching tips that are going to be tailored training that's specifically for each of these individuals here. So that's the second benefit of this, is that you've actually got some tailored feedback that's based on the data. Now, can you imagine how much time that would take for somebody to do that manually, or basically how inefficient it would be if you were just to do blanket training to everybody? And then we've also got finally this ability here to turn that free text here into an actual number. Okay, so we can actually get a rating here, and then it's going to give us the capability to go and carry out some metrics that says, okay, how many work orders have we getting through the system? How many are in each of the different categories? Okay, how many are poor, how many are okay, and how many are excellent? And then that is it. Let's see if there's any that were, most of them were a 2 at the moment. Here's one that's a rating 1. Okay, so we can see that this one here has got, this defect here was assessed as being a 1. Okay, so that's it for the first video. In the second video, we're going to go and we're going to finesse this a little bit. We're going to create some measures to look at some of the metrics here. We're going to go and actually put in some safeguards that mean you're not going to get duplicates like I've got here. So once you've submitted it, we're going to make a check to make sure that we're not going to submit something twice, because that's going to cost us money, and it's going to basically make us have 2 assessments where we only really need 1. We'll do a few other bits and pieces just to fine tune the model. Okay, so thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you in the next video.